It looked like the most boring vehicle on the M1 motorway. A standard sedan with derby plates, cruising the middle lane on a wet Tuesday evening. There were no sirens, no erratic lane changes, and absolutely no flashing lights. To the tired commuters and long-haul truckers sharing the tarmac, it was just a local cab, perhaps ferrying a businessman home from the airport, or taking a late shift worker to a factory. But inside, the silence was heavy. There were no passengers in the back seat. Instead, the cargo was stuffed into innocent-looking holdalls in the boot. The driver did not check his mirrors nervously. He did not speed, and he obeyed every single rule of the highway code. This car was not part of a standard taxi route. It was the bloodline of a shadow system that snaked through council estates, unassuming lockups, and desolate car parks in the dead of night. This was not just a drug run. It was a masterclass in modern smuggling. For 408 days, this system operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. It was a network that fed kilos of high-purity cocaine, shipped directly from the skyscrapers of Dubai to the grim grey streets of British cities. There were no bloody turf wars, no drill rap videos boasting of wealth, and no gold chains. Instead, there were token codes, military-grade encrypted phones, and routines so obsessively clean they looked entirely legitimate. The genius of the operation lay in its camouflage. Police profilers look for outliers, nervous young men in flashy rentals or battered vans with expired tax. They do not look twice at a licensed taxi driver doing 68 miles per hour on a motorway. This is the grey fleet phenomenon, where criminals weaponize the mundane to become invisible. For over a year, this invisibility cloak worked perfectly. But even the most sophisticated armor has a chink. In this £165 million drug empire, that chink was not a snitch or a rival gang. It was a single message, typed in trust and sent in seconds, that eventually shattered the silence. This is the story of how a criminal enterprise was built behind the meter of a taxi, and how the very technology they trusted to stay hidden ended up exposing every secret they had. At the center of this ghost network was Pardeep Manjula. If you saw him walking down the street, you would not clutch your wallet. He did not look like a kingpin. There were no diamond-encrusted watches on his wrist, no tanned skin from foreign holidays, and to the taxman, he had no visible income at all. He lived in a small, nondescript terrace house in Willow Row, Darley Abbey. It was the kind of property you would walk past 1,000 times without glancing at the windows. But inside that cramped house, behind a plain white PVC door, Manjula was orchestrating one of the most lucrative drug operations in British history. Manjula, at 45 years old, had realized something most criminals miss: attention is expensive. He did not chase fame, he chased weight and volume. He was not interested in shifting ounces on street corners. He was an importer of brick-solid, high-purity cocaine. He viewed himself not as a gangster, but as a CEO of a logistics firm that just happened to be illegal. He built a structure beneath him comprising couriers, counters, and buyers, all operating on strict roles rather than street reputation. There were no threats of violence because the system did not require it. It only required efficiency. But as Manjula sat in his quiet Derby home believing his encrypted devices made him untouchable, the clock was already ticking on his £165 million empire. Pardeep Manjula may have been the architect, sketching the blueprints of the empire from his terrace house. But a blueprint alone cannot move a single gram of product. For the machinery to work, Manjula needed a general, someone to translate the abstract desire for wealth into the concrete reality of motion. That responsibility fell to Jaswant Khajla. At 41 years old and based in Coventry, Khajla was the gang's logistics manager. In a traditional criminal organization, this role is usually filled by the most feared man in the room, someone who rules through intimidation. But Khajla was different. He did not need a Glock or a baseball bat to maintain control. He relied on something far more powerful: absolute, unwavering discipline. Khajla did not just arrange deliveries. He engineered a system designed to be invisible. He approached the drug trade with the mindset of a FedEx regional director, rather than a cartel lieutenant. He mapped out pickups in Luton and drop-offs in Derby with military precision. Cash returns were routed through obscure side streets, petrol stations, and forgotten car parks. Nothing was left to chance. Everything was timed. And everything was rehearsed. He created a just-in-time delivery network. In legitimate business, this reduces warehousing costs. In the drug trade, it minimizes prison time. By ensuring that drugs were moved immediately upon arrival and never stockpiled for long, Manjula reduced the window of vulnerability. If police raided a safe house, they would find it empty. The product was always on the road, always flowing, never static. His couriers were given scripts to follow. Routes were calculated to the mile, and deviations were forbidden. There were no risky shortcuts to save 10 minutes. Drugs were moved across county lines without drawing a whisper of heat because the cars blended in, and the drivers were calm. If a handoff went wrong, if a buyer was late, or a location looked compromised, Manjula did not panic. He simply rerouted the asset, reassigned the drop, and kept the flow moving. He was the calm voice on the other end of the encrypted phone, the air traffic controller of the underworld. Manjula was also the primary point of contact for the higher-ups. When gang members needed to fly to Dubai to meet the suppliers at the source, it was Manjula who made it happen. He handled the travel logistics, flights, hotels and tight schedules, ensuring the link between the Derby streets and the Dubai skyscrapers remained unbroken. This was not a backstreet operation. It was built like a multinational logistics firm that never closed and never stalled. At the height of their operation, police estimated that £400,000 was being generated every single day. That is an industrial level of revenue requiring industrial level management. Under Manjula's watch, not a single kilo was ever left sitting too long. He understood that a stagnant package is a seized package. His couriers were not enforcers. They were not gangsters in the traditional sense. They were assets, trained to deliver and disappear. As long as he kept the operation clean, the system stayed invisible. It was a perfect loop of supply and demand, hidden in plain sight on the British motorway network. But efficiency creates arrogance. The gang began to believe their system was flawless, unaware that perfection is often just an illusion waiting to be shattered. While Jaswant Manjula ensured the drugs moved across the asphalt without friction, Munraj Johal had an equally critical role. He tracked the avalanche of cash that flowed back. Based in Luton, the 32-year-old was the gang's chief financial officer. Johal was quiet by design. He did not handle the product. His hands never touched the bricks of cocaine. His job was to follow every pound the empire generated, running the books with the meticulousness of a forensic accountant. In the chaotic world of drug dealing, money usually disappears, stolen by runners, lost in bad counts, or seized by rivals. Johal ensured that did not happen. He maintained detailed spreadsheets that logged every sale, every expense, and every outstanding debt. This was not done in cryptic slang or street code. The entries were written in plain figures because Johal believed the EncroChat system was impenetrable. He was not hiding what they earned, he was managing it. When money returned from the regional buyers, it did not just get thrown into a duffel bag. It was assigned. Bundles of cash were tagged with token numbers, unique identifiers, usually taken from the serial number of a specific banknote. This token system is the hallmark of high-level international crime. It acts like a physical two-factor authentication. A courier hands over the cash, provides the token note, and the transaction is verified. If a bundle went missing, the token system allowed Johal to trace exactly where the leak was. It was a crime syndicate, structured with the rigor of a corporate audit. Johal's encrypted handset was the nerve center of the financial operation. It did not just link him to the crew in Derby and Luton. It connected him directly to the suppliers in Dubai. He updated them regularly, reporting exact totals moved and profit margins hit. There were no rough estimates, no ballpark figures, and no rounding up. He provided clean, exact data. This transparency built immense trust with the suppliers. In the underworld, consistency is currency, and Johal's books were impeccable, but he could not handle the physical volume of cash alone. His cousin, Nimrat Bhatia, was recruited to help with the heavy lifting, quite literally. Cash is heavy, and counting millions takes time. Bhatia, only 26 years old, was the cashier. When officers eventually raided a flat in London, they found him frozen mid-task. He was surrounded by £530,000 in sterling, stacked in neat towers, sorted, and half-counted. It was a scene straight out of a movie, but without the glamour. Bhatia was already handling more cash in a single afternoon than most people see in a lifetime. Together, Johal and Bhatia tracked tens of millions of pounds without drawing attention from the banking system. They did not need fake invoices, shell companies or offshore accounts to wash the money initially. They just needed discipline and the phones they thought were safe. But therein lay the fatal flaw. In their quest for corporate efficiency, they created a perfect paper trail for the prosecution. Every spreadsheet, every token code, every logged payment was another breadcrumb. They were documenting their own conspiracy in high definition, unaware that they were writing their own indictments one entry at a time. They believed they were operating in a digital fortress, but the walls were already transparent. In the lexicon of the Derby Gang, there was no such thing as a stash house. That term implied chaos, desperation, and messy piles of contraband hidden under floorboards. Instead, they called them offices. There was one in Derby and one in Luton. Two residential addresses hidden in plain sight on quiet suburban streets. But these were not just safe houses, they were fully functioning financial control centers. In Derby, the operation was run by Manveer Singh, known on the encrypted network as Manvak. Singh was not a street dealer pushing grams. He was an office manager in the strictest sense. He did not handle the raw transactions on the street. His job was to keep the engine of the enterprise lubricated and running. Money poured in from across the country, arriving in gym bags and shoeboxes. Inside the office, Singh and his team treated the cash with the reverence of bank tellers. The currency was sorted into bundles, logged with the ubiquitous token numbers, and vacuum sealed to reduce bulk. The sheer volume of physical cash was a logistical nightmare. Paper money is heavy, dirty, and takes up space. At the height of the operation, police estimated that between £1 million and £2 million could be sitting in a single unit at any given time, just waiting for redistribution. These were not chaotic drug dens filled with smoke and paranoia. They were controlled, sterile environments. Phones were used only when necessary. Names were never spoken aloud, and everything was reduced to data, product weights, token codes, and delivery times. Even when police surveillance teams were physically watching the exterior, the processing lines inside never slowed down. While Singh kept the internal gears turning with quiet efficiency, a very different breed of criminal was keeping the demand high on the outside. The gang did not deal in £20 bags. They sold in kilos, and their customers were wholesale buyers, men trusted enough to receive serious weight and rich enough to pay for it up front. Michael Karim, based in Nottingham, was the archetype of this high-rolling clientele. Unlike the disciplined, modest lifestyle of the gang's CEO Manjula, Karim lived to be seen. He was not just buying for himself, he was feeding a massive regional network. Over the course of the conspiracy, police believe he purchased at least 9 kilos of high-purity cocaine, but it was what Karim did with the profits that highlighted the dangerous psychology of the mid-level boss. The money did not go into savings accounts or under mattresses. It was spent loud. Karim treated Nottingham like his personal playground. He rented 46 high-end cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Range Rovers, cycling through them to maintain an image of untouchable wealth. He spent £91,000 on 2 luxury apartments, flew to Las Vegas for weekends, and watched football matches across Europe from VIP boxes. The rest of the cash evaporated in designer stores like Harvey Nichols and Flannels. Investigators later calculated he had benefited from the crime by over £1 million, though they could only claw back a fraction of it. Karim was not alone. Other buyers like Joseph Davidson, Kelly Williamson, and Muhammad Shafi acted as regional distribution hubs. They did not work in chaos. They worked in territories. While they did not wear corporate titles, they each played a vital part in keeping the machine fed. None of them knew exactly how the supply line worked, how the taxi drivers moved the product, or how the offices bundled the cash. They only knew that it did work. On time, on weight, and with no delays. For over a year, that reliability was enough to keep them rich. But while the buyers were busy spending their illicit gains, the silence that protected them was about to be broken by a technological miracle they never saw coming. Getting kilos in and cash out was not just about high-level buyers or savvy accountants. It required physical movement that was fast, quiet, and unnoticed. This is where the Iqbal brothers became the ultimate assets. Basharat and Banaras Iqbal were not runners in the usual, frantic sense of the word. They were legitimate taxi drivers, licensed and locally known in Derby. They were the kind of men you would flag down for a ride to the train station without a second thought. But behind the meter, they were the arteries of the operation. Basharat, the older of the two, moved both drugs and cash, using his valid taxi license as the perfect cover. A taxi crossing city lines at 3:00 a.m. does not look suspicious. It looks like someone working a hard shift. This camouflage allowed them to move freely, while the rest of the country was locked down or sleeping. While the couriers moved physical assets across the asphalt, something else was moving in the background data. The entire gang ran their empire through EncroChat. These were not standard smartphones. They were modified devices with the GPS, camera and microphone often physically removed, running a hidden operating system designed solely for encrypted communication. The gang believed these devices were untouchable, a digital black hole, where evidence went to die. Because of this absolute faith in the technology, they spoke freely. There was no need for complex codes or whispers. They shared addresses, drop points and totals moved. They even shared personal photos, a fatal error born of complacency. One message sent through the network showed the interior of a house, where police were later able to match the pattern of the curtains to a property in Derby. Another message included a photo of a dog in the corner of the frame, the exact same dog officers would find during a raid. They did not hide behind aliases. They talked openly, daily, trusting the network completely. One member even tracked profits down to the penny in a spreadsheet sent directly through the phone. They believed they were operating in a vacuum. What they did not know was that the system had already been cracked. European law enforcement had infiltrated the EncroChat servers in France and were feeding the intelligence to UK investigators in real time. Every message was being copied. Every movement was being logged. For weeks, the police were essentially sitting in the passenger seat of every deal. By the time the gang realized something was wrong, the trap had already snapped shut. The map of their network was drawn, and nothing had been missed, not the words, not the handovers, and certainly not the faces behind them. In April 2020, surveillance teams watched as one of the couriers left a residential address in Derby, hold all in hand. He walked calmly to his car. No rush, no lookout, just a short drive planned across town. Inside the bag lay 7 kilos of cocaine, clean, packed and high purity. He did not know that officers were already moving in. He was stopped quietly, on a side road outside the city. There was no dramatic high-speed chase. No shootout, and no confrontation. It was a controlled arrest, surgical in its execution. The drugs were seized, and the packaging matched exactly what had been seen in the EncroChat photos. The weight confirmed the scale, and the timing of the handoff aligned perfectly with a message recovered just hours earlier. This was not just a drug bust. It was the physical confirmation of the digital evidence. From that point, everything accelerated. Search warrants were signed, entry teams were briefed. And the targets were not just the bosses. They were the couriers, the buyers, the cash handlers, and the coordinators. Everyone with a role was boxed in. The system that was built to keep them hidden had become the very thing that destroyed them. In January 2022, the atmosphere inside Derby Crown Court was heavy with the weight of inevitable justice. Prosecutors began laying out the full anatomy of the case, revealing a conspiracy so vast, it had taken 4 separate trials to fully process. This was not a standard drug trial involving desperate addicts or low-level street runners. It was the dismantling of a corporation. Prosecutor Gareth Wheatman described the operation as industrial scale, a term usually reserved for factories, not crime rings. He detailed how, in just a short window between March 16 and April 30, 2020, the gang had moved over £18.6 million. They were averaging more than £400,000 in revenue per day. The evidence presented was not reliant on shaky eyewitness testimony or turned informants. The gang had documented their own downfall. Their trusted EncroChat devices had acted as digital scribes, recording every kilo, every pound, and every location. Judge Jonathan Bennett noted that this was a structured criminal enterprise, and the sentences he was about to hand down would reflect the sheer discipline of the common network they had built. When the gavel finally fell, the hierarchy collapsed from the top down. Pardeep Manjula, the unassuming CEO who lived in a terrace house while moving millions, received the longest sentence, 18 years and 3 months. The court recognized him as the puppet master who controlled the entire supply chain from the shadows. Jaswant Kujla, the logistics genius who treated drug trafficking like a freight business, was jailed for 15 years and 3 months. His systems of invisible couriers and timed drops had failed him in the end. Manraj Johal, the meticulous accountant who tracked every penny on spreadsheets, was handed 15 years and 8 months. The very ledgers he kept to ensure trust with Dubai suppliers became the roadmap for his imprisonment. the collapse continued through the ranks. Manveer Singh, the manager of the Derby counting house, received 13 years for his role in processing the mountain of dirty cash. Michael Karim, the flashy buyer who had lived a life of luxury on the proceeds, was sentenced to 10 years. His designer clothes and high-performance cars were gone, replaced by a prison uniform. The wider network, the couriers, the regional distributors, and the lower-level enforcers were not spared. Men like Joseph Davidson, Muhammad Shafi, and the taxi-driving Iqbal brothers were all given lengthy terms. Even those with lesser roles, like John Castledine, a 63-year-old with learning difficulties who had been used to count cash, received over 7 years. In total, 18 people were convicted. When the years were added up, the gang was sentenced to a combined total of 167 years in prison. It was a complete decapitation of the syndicate. The network that had run so silently, so efficiently, and so profitably for 408 days, had been wiped off the map. The police had achieved what few operations ever do. They did not just arrest the street dealers. They dismantled the infrastructure, from the logistics to the finance, all the way up to the executive board. The case serves as a stark reminder of the new reality of organized crime. It is no longer just about muscle and territory, it is about encryption, logistics and supply chain management. But it also proved that no technology is invincible. The Manjula gang believed they were operating in a ghost world, unseen and unheard. But in the digital age, silence is not security. They built a £165 million empire on the back of a phone system they did not control, and in doing so, they handed the keys to their own cells directly to the police. What do you make of this case? Did the sentences fit the industrial scale of the operation? Or given the £165 million value, should they have gone further? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into real UK crime stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Turn on notifications and stay with us. There is always another case to uncover.